Hello and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's video we're going to be looking at some scene poetry questions for the child who was shot dead by soldiers in Nyanga. I've created 4 questions to sort of mimic the exam style, and let's get into it. So firstly, there's a couple of videos I would advise that you watch before you get started on this video. So firstly, I would watch the scene poetry video that is on my channel, as well as the video on studying this particular poem and all of its details, line by line analysis, the child who was shot dead by soldiers in Nyanga, because we're not going to go through it now, we're just going to focus on the questions now. And then lastly, I would recommend that you watch the video with the solitude questions, because I give you a bit of background in terms of how to answer poetry questions. So please watch all of that before we get started with this poem. So let's read our 4 questions together and sort of analyze them a little bit before you can pause the video, write your answers down, and then meet me back here to go through the answers. So number 1 says, refer to the title and the first line, account for the paradox with reference to the theme of the poem. So this is a 3-mark question, so you need to aim to have at least 3 sentences in your answer. You need to explain the paradox by referring to the title and the first line, which makes sense because paradox is a form of contradiction, so you've got to address the one thing and then show how it contradicts the other thing. And then you also need to make mention of the theme of the poem. Number 2, provide 2 pieces of evidence from the poem which alert the reader to it being about South Africa. This is a pretty straightforward question. You just have to provide 2 pieces of evidence here. Number 3, account for the anaphora in lines 18 to 22. So here you need to show your marker that you know what anaphora is and explain why it is used here. And number 4, refer to the final stanza, explain the irony in the final line of the poem. 3 marks. So here you need to obviously look at your final stanza, which is the 1-line stanza, and you need to explain the irony. And irony is also a form of contradiction, so there's 2 aspects to discuss, and then you can discuss the effectiveness of it. So I encourage you to pause the video here to try and answer the questions yourself, and meet me back. We're going to go through some model answers. I hope that you gave that a go. So now we're going to go through some model answers to these questions. Remember, no one's going to have the exact same answers as anyone else. That is the beauty of English. So it's really about looking at these model answers and seeing that you have approached it in a similar way, approached the question in terms of answering each part of the question accurately and explaining yourself well enough. So now question number 1, refer to the title in the first line, account for the paradox with reference to the message of the poem. The title indicates that the child was shot dead. Yet, the first line contradicts this by stating that the child is not dead. This statement is seemingly contradictory and can thus be termed a paradox. The message of this poem is about the enduring power of the anti-apartheid movement and how even though the child is physically dead, his spirit remains alive to inspire the resistance fighters. Therefore, the paradox highlights the message of the poem. So here, you needed 2 marks explaining your paradox, each aspect of the paradox and why it's contradictory, and then a mark for the message of the poem. Question 2. Provide 2 pieces of evidence from the poem which alert readers to it being about South Africa. The use of the word heather refers to the veld of the South African landscape, and the listing of places such as Nyanga and Sharpeville show readers that the poem is set in South Africa. That's a fairly straightforward question. I hope that you got it right. Question 3. Account for the anaphora in lines 18 to 22. The anaphora of the child, I should have maybe put here, it's the repetition of the word or the phrase at the start of subsequent lines to really show my marker I know what anaphora is, but I have quoted the anaphora, which is good enough as well, is effective as it emphasizes that the child and the resistance his legacy represents has abundant influence which affects every part of society. So in this answer, I'm going to get a mark for showing I know what the anaphora is and for my explanation, which as you can see links to the theme of the poem. So whenever you're in doubt, link the figure of speech to the theme or the message of the poem, or in this case the poetic device. And lastly, question 4, refer to the final stanza, explain the irony in the final line of the poem. The apartheid government attempted to control African people through the implementation of the pass law system. However, the child's legacy is unbounded and unlimited as it moves without a pass. The child's legacy will inspire resistance despite the efforts of the apartheid government to limit African freedom. The irony emphasizes the unyielding and defiant spirit of resistance. So in your answer, you had to make it clear that you knew what irony meant. It's when it's the opposite of what is expected occurs. And so here it is not expected, or the apartheid government would not expect that the child's legacy would, inspire so many people because they've tried to restrict African freedom, and yet the child's legacy is limitless. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this video helpful. I'll see you in the next one.